Well, there went 30% of my sermon this morning. So she said I took all of her story, and so, but I'm just going to repeat it anyway as we get into this thing. I'm from a second-generation Fayetteville family. So, born and raised in San Diego, and that the revelation. This has nothing to do with my message this morning, by the way. Thank you so much. I've had a great time. We're not done, but I've had a fantastic time. Thank you, Pastor, for the invitation. And this morning, I finished this message last night at 2 in the morning, and because you're getting all 4 brand new sermons, and then tidied it up a little bit early today, this morning. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, my grandma was born here. My mother was born here in Fayetteville. And I was raised on the West Coast. But you know what? The truth is, most of my DNA is here. I am more Fayetteville than your pastor and his wife are. It's true. And so that's probably one of the reasons why I think we're vibing well together this morning. And so let's see what God's going to do today, because we're going to have a wonderful time in Jesus. And I set my stopwatch. There we go. And as Carol mentioned, this message, and I told you some of the things that God taught me over 40 years for the last couple messages. Talked a little bit about success. I told you about our surrender. Carol's the yes girl, and I'm the one who followed on, and she remained the yes girl, full of faith. And to this day, 43 years later, in August, we will have been married 43 years. I told you last night about the things that matter most. And those are the first things, the things that God really wants. But this morning, I want to tell you about a battle Carol and I never chose, and it's this story, but I have my own Mark flavor on it. But there's a section in the Word of God out of 2 Chronicles chapter 14 and verse number 9. It's about the Ethiopian army that came against the children of Israel. And I'm going to read it. Zerah the Ethiopian came against Judah with an army of 1 million men. This is 2 Chronicles 14:9. Then Asa cried out, Lord, there is no one beside you to help in the battle between the mighty and those who have no strength. And some will say King Asa. I call him Asa because there's a world-class mountain bike racer. His name's Asa Vermette, so I go with Asa. So Asa receives some news that every leader dreads. That's an army is coming. Not a small army, not a manageable army, but a 1 million-man army. And it's marching towards them. Marching towards Judah, and at that moment, this young leader, Asa, hears the news, and he understands something. The battle is bigger than us. It's bigger than our resources. They say China has a 1 million-man army, but there was a 1 million-man army before that. And that's why he prays, Lord, there's no one beside you to help us in this battle between the mighty and those who have no strength. You ever feel like the battle is bigger than you this morning? And you're fighting against a 1 million-man army, if you will, and we're in Fayetteville. Everyone understands what happens when an army shows up. Armies don't ask permission. They don't check your schedule. They don't care about what your plans were. They just arrive, and as Carol mentioned, in 1987, an army marched into our house. It wasn't soldiers, it wasn't tanks, and it wasn't weapons. But what marched into our house, small little apartment there, just up the hill from where Balboa Park is and the San Diego Zoo is, but fear marched into our home. Because armies don't ask permission. Uncertainty marched into our home. Certainly some anxiety came in. Doctors, hospitals, questions marched into our home. And it's a battle that we didn't choose. And how many know we don't choose the opposition that comes against us many times? It just arrives sometimes in our home. And every believer is going to face a battle that's bigger than you. If you haven't yet, and like Carol said, our first 4 years of salvation were so golden. We really didn't know what a trial was. I mean, her words were perfect. They were succinct and to the point. We didn't struggle. She married her best friend. I married the dream girl of my entire life. And ministry went well and church went well. And now we were out. She didn't mention it, but we were out. The Buckles had launched us as the first church out of San Diego. And we were out pioneering when Lindsay was born. And so we're living the dream. We're in our early 20s, mid-20s, and everything is perfect. And then all of a sudden, when an army marches into your house, everything changes. And the question is not, can I defeat it? The question is, can I trust God in it? This is the message this morning, and I'm praying that it's really going to help us. And the title, if you're a message taker, is when the army marched into our house. And so the army arrived, 1987. Young couple, saved just a few years, pioneering a church, just like I mentioned, full of dreams, full of hope. It didn't seem like any obstacle was in front of us. Full of faith. We didn't have a lot of experience. We didn't have a lot of know-how, but we had a lot of passion, a lot of zeal. We loved God, the things of God. And your church here is just a duplicate of what Pastor Buckles and his wife and his young family did in San Diego, California. I walk into this, and I'm going to use the surreal segue. And to me, it's surreal. I'm seeing a better duplicate. And we are talking 40-some odd years later. And you and I will forever be linked from this 48 hours that we're going to spend together from Friday night till Sunday night. And I don't believe that's a coincidence. I don't believe it's circumstances. I don't believe it's happenstance. But I believe it's God. Lindsay's born. Carol mentioned 9 pounds, 10 ounces, beautiful baby girl. Every couple, things are going perfect. We're overjoyed. And as she mentioned, things begin to change. And I remember in that hospital room, Carol had a C-section, had to stay a little bit longer. And I remember the pediatrician walking into the room, Dr. Ben Spiegel. I will never, ever forget Dr. Ben Spiegel. He walked into the room. He's a young doctor. He didn't look much older than us, probably 5 years older than we were. And he has Lindsay in his arms, and this is like yesterday, but it is 40 years ago, 39 years. Takes Lindsay, and hospital rooms are a little bit dark, and he goes over to the window, and I think he pulled up the shade of the window because he wanted some natural light because he was noticing some things about Lindsay that we had no clue. I mean, 9 pounds, 10 ounces is a pretty big baby girl. So the last thing in the world that you're thinking is unhealthy is part of the equation, but unhealthy was very much part of the equation. And so he said, you know what, I want to take Lindsay and have some tests run. It didn't seem dramatic or really alarming to us. It was just a sentence. But this was when that million-man army marched into our life. Because million-man armies don't just instantly appear. They're on the horizon first. And that's exactly what happened to us. The pediatrician's comment wasn't the battle. It was kind of like the first dust cloud from an approaching army. And if you've lived life at all for a period of time, you can kind of see sometimes when the dust cloud begins to appear on the horizon, and you know something is marching towards you. And this is all happening, and as Carol mentioned, suddenly words we had never ever heard before became part of our lives. Truncus arteriosus, a severe congenital heart defect. 17 days later, our daughter was headed for open heart surgery, massive open heart surgery. She's missing parts in her heart, literally. We have to sew in a Dacron polyester tube. She has to have a wall built between her heart. She has to have a valve installed into her heart. She's 17 days old, and this whole swirl is happening. You know, one moment you're celebrating a birth, the next moment you're talking to surgeons and everything switches. One moment you're planning a future, the next moment you're wondering what the future is going to look like. How many know what I'm talking about this morning? It might not be a surgery or a child, it might be a marriage or finances or family members or disunity or it might just be your mind this morning. So questions arrived, and sleepless nights arrived, and worst case scenarios arrived. I don't know if you can be kind of like me sometimes. I'm a real analytical thinker in so many ways, but I'll let the process carry on beyond the moment, and sometimes I'll calculate the worst case scenario. That's not a great way to live, by the way. I don't know if anyone's like that here besides me, but I'll let that go forward. And so, like I said, all these things are swirling around. And I mean, if I'm honest, the battle wasn't just happening in the hospital. The battle was happening in our minds. And if you've lived very long, you've had a dust cloud moment. We live in the desert now in Arizona, and they have these Habib storms, these things that come. I mean, it's something like out of an Armageddon movie. I mean, I'm raised in San Diego, and the first time I see this thing on the horizon, it is a wall. It looks like it is 10 miles high. And it's coming at you from the horizon. It's not moving very quickly. And so I can recognize those just like you can recognize when a dust cloud moment is coming. A phone call, a test result, a conversation, a knock at the door. Because nobody's battle begins with a battle. It always begins with the dust cloud on the horizon. And then suddenly everything changes. I'll pause for a moment. It is these moments that are going to define not only your today, but it's going to define your tomorrow. How you handle these. And I know we have a challenge in the corner there of our sanctuary. And I'm not preaching this message because I know your challenge. I'm preaching this message because our challenge, and dust clouds come. They come for all of us. It might not be health related. It could be so many other things that begin to transpire. And that's exactly where King Asa was. And that's where Carol and I found ourselves in 1987, facing a battle we could not win on our own. Because there are times this morning when strength just runs out. I mean, let's be honest this morning. That's where Asa's prayers meant so much to me, because when news reached him, he understood something. The battle was bigger than him. The financial challenge is bigger than you. The health challenge, the future challenge, your anxiety, your stress, your moment, your dust cloud, whatever it is bigger than you are. It's bigger than the army, bigger than his resources, bigger than his ability to control the outcome. And I have always been a person who wants to control the outcome. Move the pieces, structure everything, organize things. And I learned very quickly through this experience that doesn't work. That's probably between Pastor Buckles and my experiences, that's where I lost all my beautiful golden curly locks. You don't get the OG person, you just get the old guy version. Bigger than the ability to control. And that's why Asa prayed, Lord, there's no one beside you to help in the battle between the mighty and those who have no strength. When a 1,000,000-man army marches into your home, you're facing a battle that you can't win by yourself. So I understand that prayer now. I understand what it means to face something a lot bigger than that I have the ability to solve, because one of the hardest moments in life is realizing that your strength is not enough, especially if you're a dude. Because as men, we like solutions. We like to fix things. I learned very quickly, having a wife, that my wife doesn't want me to fix everything when she's talking to me. She just wants me to listen to her. Just listen, be compassionate, show some empathy. I'm sorry you're really going through that, honey. I could have never said that before. I said, well, let me fix this. Here's the problem. Let me tell you what's going on. If you just do this, everything will be okay. Because that's what dudes do. Can I be real this morning? That's who we are. But they don't want that. They just want you to put your arm around them, tell them you love them, and everything will be okay. Kind of like what God told Carol. Everything is going to be fine. But men, we like solutions. We like taking action. If something breaks, we repair it. If there's a problem, we solve it. If there's a battle, we fight it. But every now and then, life hands you something that cannot be fixed by effort. It means you can't work harder. You can't think harder. You can't father harder. You can't pastor harder. You can't simply come to the end of yourself. And that's exactly where we found ourselves. 17 days old, surgeons could operate, doctors could advise, the specialists could explain, but nobody could promise us tomorrow. And for the first time in my life, 26 years of age, I found myself facing something that I could not control. I could not fix Lindsay. And I couldn't carry the battle for her. I couldn't guarantee the outcome. And this is why we're in church this morning. I'm glad you're here this morning. Believe me, I know your pastor, he's really glad but I am really glad that you're here this morning, because I want to share another bit about who I am and how I got to this place. We will forever be linked, Mark and Carol Tozer, and in our entire family, to this congregation. My mom was born here. My grandma was born here. Your pastor was my pastor. If you want to know what you're going to be like when you get old, you just look at me. You know, because guys would tell guys, kind of like on a side joke, say, hey, bro, I want to take a look at her mom. I know it's bad. I know that sounds bad, but it's not really bad. But I'm saying it because I'm the first disciple, and this is what I look like today. And he probably had no idea what I look like today. So this is your fault, by the way. All we could do is trust God. And that's where faith becomes real. Not when you're strong, not when you're confident, not when you've got all the answers. Faith becomes real when you run out of strength and God is all that you have left. And that's where our young leader in the Bible, Asa, Million-Man Army, was marching. Everyone's got opinions. You've probably figured that out. Everyone has strategies. Everybody has fears, but only God has the outcome. And somewhere in the middle of that fear and uncertainty, God gave us a promise, and you heard it. But there's something interesting about promises, because sometimes you can live between a promise and proof. And I'm going to explain exactly what happened, and she did it in many ways, because somewhere in the middle of that fear and uncertainty and helplessness, God spoke to Carol, Lindsay will be fine. And you heard it firsthand. Now, if this was a Hollywood movie, the story ends right there. God spoke, everyone rejoices, the battle is over, but that's not how life works, and it's usually not how God works. Because after the promise came, the battle remained. She has open heart surgery. We had a fantastic open heart surgeon. Guy's like 80 years old today, and I tracked him down 30-something years after her surgery. He works at Stanford University, 80 years old as a consultant in that thing. And how many know if you email some famous world-class open heart surgeon, they don't email you back? But he did. As soon as he saw Lindsay Tozer and said, you did her open heart surgery not only when she was 17 days old, but also again when she was 8 years old, he responded. Not only did he respond, I've talked to him on the phone twice since then, once for over an hour, just talking about all those things. You know, we serve a God who will talk to us for more than an hour. And I'm thankful for Dr. Lamberti to reach out and do that. And that just warms your heart. But how much more so in the house of God? Our God brings this incredible comfort when we so desperately need it in life. But after the promise came, the battle remained. The promise came. The surgery went well. He walked into the waiting room where Carol and I was. And after a long surgery, there's a lot of people there. They're watching TV. This guy was cocky and confident, and he's still got his scrubs on, his booties on. He walked, the TV's blasting. He walks up to the TV, kicks the TV off. That's the type of surgeon you want. That's going to take dominion and control. Now I really got your, and then no one said anything because Dr. Lamberti, John Lamberti, has just finished a successful surgery and he wants no obstacles, so he kicks the TV off. Sometimes you got to kick the devil in the teeth this morning and kick the noise, if you will, off. But the battle still remained because after that, as you heard, Lindsay didn't eat. So the promise came, Lindsay will be fine. But the proof did not. Because most of us want both at the same time. The word and the outcome. The answer and the explanation. But God often tells you the ending while you're living in the middle. Everything will be fine, but we're not living in the fine. Does this make sense this morning? I don't have much more. We're living in the middle of it. And the middle lasted a while. I heard the story, feeding her through an NG tube, and I know people have much worse things, but that was our million-man army in our 550 square foot apartment. Marched in there, and what Carol didn't share is I came home from work and she was doing dishes and in the kitchen tending to some things, and she had tears in her eyes, and I said, honey, it's obvious kind of what's going on, but I really didn't know what's going on. I didn't know that she had tried to put the NG tube into her nose, down into her stomach. And so she had tears streaming down her eyes, and that's when she told me what she did. And you could imagine, as a 20-something-year-old husband, I'm thinking, my goodness, all these things are going. And I promise you, it felt like a million-man army. But we also knew what God's promise was. We weren't without hope, but we were still in the midst of it. And all these things are transpiring. And I realized something at that moment. The battle just wasn't happening in Lindsay. The battle was happening in us. And I didn't know at the time, but I know today, 39 years later, that God was forming something in us that would cause us to survive things that I can't even share to you that we've survived. You surviving that dust storm that's coming, that phone call, that knock on the door, is not just for that moment. It's for this moment. Only God knew I'd be in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where my grandmother was born, my mom was born. I'd only ever been here one time when I was a little boy. Only God knew that the man who was my pastor would become your pastor. And 40 years later, Mark Tozer would be preaching to you on a Sunday morning about these battles. Let's finish this morning, because when an army leaves, it leaves some things behind. And eventually, the proof caught up with the promise. Aren't you glad for that? God is a God who proves himself. Amen? I think I got to say that again. God is a God who will prove himself to you. He'll prove himself. There is a promise. But some of you this morning, you're living in between the promise and the proof. And the proof caught up with the promise, but didn't happen all at once, not overnight. Little by little, we began to see God do exactly what he would say, and you heard this story of Lindsay eating. But part of the story Carol left out for the sake of time is a few days afterwards, Lindsay stopped eating again. And in California, they have something called CPS, Child Protective Services. In California, they are brutal. They suspect anything, mistreatment of any kind, or what they would view as you're not doing your best, they will remove your child from you. This is even back in our era. So CPS is coming for a visit at our little teeny tiny apartment because we're on the radar of all that's happened with Lindsay. And I don't remember if they were coming the next day, but they were coming very quickly, and Lindsay stopped eating. So Carol and I had a decision to make. Are we going to put the tube back in? Are we going to stand on what God wanted for us? Was putting the tube back in evil? No. In every way, it seemed like 100% the right thing to do, because my mind, here comes remember the million-man army, even after the miracle, sometimes the army leaves some things behind. And that fear was still sitting there. It's in my mind. You know, it's kind of like the old saying, it feels like the carpet was pulled out right from underneath you. Things are finally starting to gel and to solidify, and the victory's coming, and we're going to get our life back together, and things are going to work. The marriage is going to work. The family's going to work. The church is going to work. Anxiety is going to leave. Fear is going to leave. But then all of a sudden, you look on the horizon, and there's the dust cloud again. So we made the decision. We're going to believe God. And as Carol said today, they said Lindsay would never be more than 5'5". She's 5'10". She has a beautiful baby girl named Ruby. And the reason your pastor is asked to pray for Lindsay is Lindsay's heart, Ruby's 11. Lindsay's heart got hurt during the first birth. And so she wanted to have multiple children, and they said, you can have another, but you're going to have to be under constant care. And they decided the risk was too great for them. They didn't want Ruby to be motherless. And so that is what she had. And so her heart may need some more work. Remember the dust cloud on the horizon? But you know, our confidence is completely different today. We trust, we believe, and she never took heart medications. She's serving God in one of our leadership churches in Australia. The army moved into our home, and I finish. Saw a diagnosis, but God saw generations. I wonder if God did see me standing here. I'm not thinking about generations of Fayetteville, North Carolina. But I'm here, and I can't help but think about my grandmother raised here. My mom was born and raised here. God is looking at generations. The army saw a 17-day-old baby, but God saw a future. The Army saw a hospital room for Mark and Carol Tozer, but God saw a family. Everything might not have turned out like you thought or hoped it would this morning, but God sees a family. He sees a marriage. He sees a couple. He sees young people that are striving, kind of like my wife at 17 thinking, you know what, I'm in the wrong place. I don't fit here. And I'll say that to some younger people today. You will know when you get in a place that you don't fit there. You might be able to function there, you don't fit. Sometimes you'll have to look at a friend and you'll have to say, you know what, I'm out of here. Get in your car, drive away. And then you could stand up 40 years later, like my wife did, and she's not only a survivor, we are thrivers. Our God is a God who thrives. Because once you've watched God carry your child through battles like this, it's easier to trust him with the next step. The army marches in is real. The fear was real. The tears were real. But you know what? The God we met there, the God you meet in tragedy or in turmoil or in despair, financial brokenness, marital brokenness, I mentioned, anxiety. I don't know why anxiety keeps running through my mind, but the God you meet in any of these arenas of life is more than capable. So I don't think we would have ever been able to go on to the next chapters in life. 16 months later, we find ourselves getting on a plane at Los Angeles International Airport. My wife, myself, 2 suitcases, and our beautiful 2-year-old baby, Lindsay. We land in Hong Kong as the first missionary family in our fellowship to pastor, work in the People's Republic of China. That is nowhere on our radar. Because, right, it was just months before that a 1 million-man army marched into our home and does what armies do. And you can relate to this in Fayetteville. Armies come in with a strategy. And their goal is to conquer. That's what the enemy had for us. But our God is more than able. He is willing, he is ready, he is potent, and he is powerful. Your story has not been completely written. God is still penning the chapters of your life, and because when you see these things happen, and you know they were real, and you know that God met you there, and it's even more real, you can be like the leader Asa. He said, Lord, there is no one beside you to help in the battle between the mighty and those who have no strength. God defeated that 1 million-man army. God defeated our 1 million-man army, but more than that, he swung the doors open on some simple acts of obedience that changed our lives forever, blew our minds. Financial blessing, miracles, open door after open door. My heart changed. If you were here on Friday, my cold, dry heart really began to change. He gave me a new heart. Gave me a new mind, gave me a new worldview. And if that's true for Mark Tozer and Carol Tozer, that's true for you. You can have everything that's happened to us and more. I really believe that. When an army marches into your home. Let's bow our heads.